I spent 15 minutes each day for an entire year stretching to see if I could improve my flexibility. And in this video, I'll tell you what I've learned. So hello, I'm Chris. I'm a triathlete and a coach. And like a lot of triathletes and runners, I'm not very flexible. So when the COVID pandemic came and everything went into lockdown over here in England, I thought, well, what if I just really use this time to nail my flexibility and stretch pretty much every day, give it 15 or so minutes and just see what happens and see how flexible I can get over the course of a year. And so that's what I did, and this is what my year looked like. So I started out with some video classes from Alo Moves, and we'll go through each of these individually. I then did the 21-day hip opener challenge and the gravity yoga program. I then embarked on yoga teach training and used a couple of apps like Down Dog and also YouTube and a bunch of live classes. I do yoga anyway, but really nailed into those in that phase. I then used the Stretching Anatomy book by Human Kinetics, also went for Stretching Scientifically by Tom Gers, tried the Hyperbolic Stretching that you might have seen my other videos or some social media advertising on, and then I finished off with an app called GOWOD. Not entirely sure how that's pronounced, but we'll go through each of these and how I got on with them, and then we'll sum everything up at the end. The first month I used Alo Moves, which is an on-demand video streaming platform. So they have a bunch of classes and you subscribe. At the time, I think it was like $20 US a month. And you can just do all of these classes on demand. The production values are great. They film in some really beautiful, amazing locations, like really well filmed classes, really well put together. And you get apps, so I got the app on my Apple TV and I could just have a really nice class on my big TV streamed over the internet. All of that was quite nice, it was convenient, you could pick whichever class you want, and they've got quite a lot on there. There were some disadvantages though. One is that it seems to be quite Los Angeles based, like everyone there is this super skinny, super jacked, super flexible instructors. Didn't see anyone that related to like a normal person. They were all these kind of Hollywood stereotypes that I couldn't really relate to, and so a lot of the stuff they were doing was really challenging. And it's not really a program, like it's a series of classes. They do organize the classes into series, so sometimes there are stretching series, but it's really kind of build your own. There's not much structure to it. You have to build that structure in yourself. And to be honest, I didn't really feel any more flexible. I didn't really feel I was making any progress because I was just picking random classes, and eventually I was going to run out of the classes and I wasn't really sure where I was going with it. So it was okay, the production values were nice, but I really couldn't relate to the instructors and I wasn't really sure where it was going. For the next 2 months I tried Lucas Rockwood's 21-day hip opening challenge. So Lucas Rockwood runs Yoga Teachers College. It's an online teach training for yoga instructors, and he has this 21-day hip opening challenge that he runs quite regularly. It's done at the time, it was done over Instagram Live, and every day he would give you a 15-minute stretching sequence. And so you do just 3 poses and you would hold each pose for 5 minutes. And the idea behind this is that would overcome what's called the stretch reflex. So it would be enough time to allow you to relax to get a really deep stretch. Now I really like Lucas and what he's doing. He's got a podcast, I think it's called the Lucas Rockwood Show, and really like that because he's quite evidence-based. And when some of his guests come on, I think the first one I listened to, he just called one of his guests out on something that was very questionable what they were saying. And normally on podcasts, the host is just really nice and accommodating, and Lucas is a lovely guy, but he's also not afraid to say, well, okay, but what's the scientific basis for that? That really struck a chord with me because I like science. So I really like it. In terms of the 21-day hip opening challenge, I would have definitely liked a better way to have measured what progress that I made, because it was difficult to tell whether you were making progress and whether this idea of a 5-minute stretch was a good thing or not, because it was difficult to work out whether, like, when I went and I did the 21 days a couple of times, I wasn't sure whether I was getting deeper into them or not. And this whole idea of 5 minutes, well, Lucas's idea is that you hold it for 5 minutes, that gets you past the stretch reflex, but no longer than 5 minutes, because then it's diminishing returns. But what point does that diminishing returns kick in? A lot of the literature on stretching says hold it for 30 seconds to a minute. And so, again, is there much evidence that you need to hold it for 5 minutes? Well, I'm not sure, because I'm not really sure how much progress I made throughout the challenge. I liked the fact that it was live on Instagram. That was nice. So obviously, being in lockdown, I could just jump on the videos, and they were all available on demand. And in fact, I've still got access to them. So I think I paid about $50 for the challenge, and that got me the live videos, but also lifetime access to them. So I could go back and do them now. And it's quite a nice way to stretch. Like, you just spend 15 minutes. It's fairly chilled out, even though it's uncomfortable, because you're only doing the free stretches. So we then followed that up by another program that Lucas Rockwood publishes called Gravity Yoga. And this gives you, again, it's the same thing. It's like 3 stretches a day for like 15 minutes. And each day focuses on a different area. So I think there's 5 days, and you repeat that for 4 weeks. And it's part of the 4-week challenge or something. And that was quite good. I definitely got a little bit of progress there, like doing a standing forward bend and trying to reach my toes. I definitely couldn't do that when I started back in April, and I noticed some point when I really started focusing on that. So in addition to doing like the 15 minutes of set stuff that Lucas was giving me every day, I would also really try and stretch out my hamstrings to see if I could touch my toes. And doing that, like a 5-minute slow hold for that, I eventually did get to touch my toes, which is awesome. I think some of that's already gone away now that I'm not doing it daily, but for a brief period, I could actually easily touch my toes, and that was great. With the Gravity Yoga program, again, it was a one-time fee. Those are on-demand videos, so you pay your fee, you get access to the videos, and you can do them as much as you want. To be honest, the program's pretty memorable because it's like a week long, and then you just repeat that. So once you've done it a couple of times, because it's only 3 stretches a day, you pretty much remember the stretches, and you don't really need the video. Then you've just got this little program that you can follow, and if you want to do the 15 minutes every day, you probably know what you're doing after the first couple of times through. I think my issue with the whole Gravity Yoga and 21 hip hop in a day challenge is that Lucas markets it as double your flexibility in 4 weeks. Now, what does really double your flexibility mean? I don't know, like, how do you measure that? But there isn't really any way to measure it in the program. So it does seem like an unsubstantiated claim to me. Next up, I spent a couple of months doing yoga teacher training. So I already did quite a bit of yoga personally anyway. I've done yoga for a couple of years and just attending classes. So I didn't come into this stretching challenge as a complete stretching newbie. I had done a bit of flexibility work, but I thought, well, maybe if I do the teach training, then I'll really understand anatomy and stretching a little bit better, and that'll help just get me better at it. So I joined an online program because we were still in the middle of lockdown. So I joined Online Yoga School, very creative name. And they actually have a really nice setup. Like, although it's online learning, they have these live Zoom calls with a tutor and all the students, and we all practice teach each other. So that was super. I was really impressed by the level of setup we got there. And it got me doing a lot of yoga. It's like a 200-hour course to become accredited by Yoga Alliance, and 50 hours of that is home practice. So you have to do a lot of yoga at home. And it's cool because I'm a qualified Yoga Alliance teacher, and I've been teaching a weekly yoga class with my club. And you might have seen some of the videos on my channel as well. I teach some specifically yoga for triathletes videos. You can find those on my channel. So that was really nice. So I did learn some stuff about anatomy and stretching, and that was somewhat useful. A couple of drawbacks. One is that with being a teacher training, it was a lot more expensive than a lot of the other options I tried. So even though online yoga school is a super cheap way compared to, say, training at your local studio, it was like $300 or $400, which is more than the other options I'm talking about in this video. And yoga isn't very targeted, so it's good for building strength, building flexibility, building mindfulness, but it doesn't really specifically target any stretches, especially if you're just looking for stretches for running and cycling and things like that. It's not very specific in that way. And also, you might just not like yoga. You've got to really buy into yoga, I think, to get a lot out of it. And if yoga isn't for you, then it's not going to be super exciting. So part of the home practice, I was doing a ton of yoga to get my required hours in. And so I explored a bunch of different options there as well. So I spent a lot of time going through YouTube yoga classes for inspiration. And the advantage, of course, of those is they're free, and some of them are very nice. I like the fact that you get exposed to a whole different range of yoga styles by doing that. The drawback is that you have to spend a fair bit of time finding good classes, and you might just end up with crap classes. And compared to something like Alo Moves, where I can go on and I know all the classes are going to be beautiful and done by competent instructors, there is a bit of hunting on YouTube. Also did plenty of live Zoom classes with my local studio. That was quite good. Again, it tends to work well because I know some of the instructors and I know I like their classes. But again, if you don't know and you're just doing that for the first time, you probably have to be a bit hit and miss with different instructors as you figure out which ones you like. And then there's also an app called Down Dog, which will generate you a random yoga class. So you say, okay, I want a class that lasts 30 minutes. I want this focus. I want this style of yoga. And it just builds you this custom class. Now, I know a lot of people love this. I wasn't a huge fan because I like the real live instructor there. If I'm following a class, there's just something better about that for me. But I know a lot of people like the idea that they get a different class every time. They can really customize it perfectly to their needs. I think you can even set the music and things. And so if you like that concept, then that's a really good app to try. Next up, I tried reading the book Stretching Anatomy. It's published by Human Kinetics, which is a really well-respected science publisher, and it's a good book for understanding more about anatomy and more about muscles and how to stretch them. And so it was pretty interesting to read, and also gives you some stretches to do. I did some of those stretches. They were pretty reasonable stretches, and a lot of them were quite convenient as well. Some of them I could do just sat on the sofa, which works really well, because if you can find a way to fit it into your life, that's going to be very manageable. And so if I can sit watching TV and also stretching out my hamstrings, then that's ideal. The downside that it is a fairly sciencey textbook, so it's not really focused on building you a stretching program. There aren't actually many stretches in there, just a couple to illustrate what might be a good stretch for this. And so it doesn't really provide you with a whole program there. So for that reason, it didn't really hold my interest for very long, but at least it only costs the cost of one book, which is quite good. Next up, I read Stretching Scientifically, which is a book by Tom Kurz, and it uses PNF stretching, which there's some literature, like academic research, to suggest that PNF stretching might be better than classic stretching. Stretching Scientifically takes you through all the different kinds of stretching, so dynamic stretching, static stretching, PNF stretching, and explains how you can use it and hopefully to do the splits. Tom Kerrs can do the splits even in his 50s. There's a video of him doing it. It's pretty impressive flexibility what he's managed to do there, and it does give you a bit of a program. It's not a fully thought out program in my opinion. You kind of have to build it a little bit by yourself, but he gives you some really good example stretches that you can turn into a program. And again, it's just the cost of one book, so it's a pretty small investment, and then you can just do the stretches and maybe you will be able to do the splits. I definitely could not do the splits. In fact, I really struggled to find any benefit from the program. Maybe it was because I wasn't measuring very much, but the PNF stuff really wasn't working for me. But I'm glad I read the book because there was a ton of interesting stuff in there. And even though it's not really an academic book, it is aimed at the general public, it is really well referenced in terms of the scientific literature. So it's a great book to read. Next up, I tried Alex Larson's Hyperbolic Stretching. You might have seen their advertising because it's all over social media, and there's a lot of it on YouTube as well. And it's all about this, like the 4-week challenge that you can do the splits. And again, you can buy the program and you get a series of videos. So you get basically a program to do. It takes about 15 minutes. You do it 4 times a week according to the program, and in theory at the end of the 4 weeks you will be able to do the splits. It's pretty straightforward to do. Again, it uses PNF stretching, and many people have compared it to the Tom Kerrs book Scientific Stretching, and it's just like a video version of that. And I think you get a couple of ebooks as well with the program. And so the idea is you do it and you see what happens. I did it twice, so I did the 4 weeks and then I doubled it to 8 weeks to make sure I wasn't missing anything. And I've got a whole separate video about this on my channel, and you can see I do make a little bit of progress, but not a great deal. So I certainly wasn't anywhere near doing the full splits by the 8 weeks. And so I don't think it's a terrible program because I did make a bit of progress, but I don't like all of their marketing claims that seem to really suggest and sell that you're going to be this super flexible person, that PNF will somehow magically unlock everything about your stretching, because for me it didn't. I did the program, I put the $37 or whatever it is down to test their marketing claims, and for me it didn't come up to scratch. And I also don't like their marketing tactics. If you look at a lot of the reviews on YouTube, a lot of them look fake to me. You can generally tell because they talk about the program and then it turns out they've got an affiliate link that you can click in the description. So they're probably making money off that. And also when I posted my video, we got a lot of comments on there that looked like fake comments from their marketing team. You can go read some of them because I've left them up on that video, so go take a look and judge for yourselves. So I don't think it's a terrible program, but it certainly doesn't live up to the marketing that they put out, in my opinion. And I have a real problem with that when people, what I would say is lying about their products. GOWOD is an app. You download it to your phone and it gives you a customized set of daily stretches. So you go on, you pick whether you want to stretch for 8, 15 or 22 minutes per day, and it will give you a series of stretching where it gives you a pose. You hold it for 1 to 2 minutes. There's a little video of someone doing it and a bit of information about the stretch, and you just copy that for a minute and then it'll probably get you to do the other side, and tends to run slightly over. So if I select a 15-minute stretching program, it'll give me normally about 16-17 minutes of stuff to do, and you just follow the video and you do the stretch. Now it's targeted at CrossFit athletes, so it uses a lot of CrossFit terminology, like CrossFit has workout of the day, a WOD, and so I think that's where the name GOWOD comes from, and it talks a lot about CrossFit terms like protocols and things like that. Doesn't really put me off. If you think that CrossFit is a dangerous cult, maybe it will, but I think it's a very benign cult, so I'm not worried about that. I like the idea that it's a 1 to 2 minutes of stretching. That seems quite evidence-based. A lot of the literature supports that idea, and the thing I really love about GOWOD is that it gets you to do a flexibility test every month where it'll get you to do a movement and you'll measure, it's kind of self-report, how you're doing on it. And then you can do that every month and see whether your flexibility is increasing or decreasing. And it's really the only thing in this whole stretching experiment that's kind of put their money where their mouth is and say, let's test you at the start, let's test you at the end and see if we've actually managed to get you any progress. And so I have a ton of respect for them for doing that. And you can see my results here. So where I started, I've been using it for quite a while now, so you can see over the 3 months that I used it, I did make some clear progress. Even though I didn't really feel more flexible, the tests don't lie, the numbers don't lie. When I tried to make the shapes, I could make the shapes more effectively than I did when I started. So yeah, a lot of credit to GOWOD for that. And it does mix it up with different exercises each time, so that helps alleviate a bit of the boredom. Disadvantages, it's a monthly subscription, so you have to keep paying for it, compared to a lot of the other programs where you just buy it once, but you're getting something reasonably good. The other thing I find a bit frustrating is that as soon as you exit it, it's got a little countdown timer, and as soon as you exit the app, it stops. So rather than setting a stretch going, and then maybe I could go and, you know, check Facebook or whatever while I'm holding the stretch, or maybe I could go to Spotify and put some music on. As soon as I exit the GOWOD app, everything stops and I have to go back to the GOWOD app to make it start again. So that would be one little improvement I would like for the app. But overall, I really like the thing because it just takes a more scientific approach for me, because you can actually measure that progress. So what did I learn from my year of stretching? Well, it's hard to believe that an entire year has passed since COVID started and all this lockdown stuff has been happening. So what do I learn? How have I feel? Well, to be honest, I don't really feel much more or at all flexible than I did a year ago. Now, some of the tests suggest I am a bit more flexible, so it sounds like I have made progress. The GOWOD numbers suggest I have. Also, just a simple forward bend to try and reach my toes suggests that I have gained a little bit of flexibility. So that was great. It's not a year of my life completely wasted, but I really haven't gained much. And so I think it's important to remember that flexibility is an ongoing project. You're not going to magically get flexible in a couple of weeks, a couple of months. It's going to take a couple of years, probably, if you want to make a real dent into your flexibility. Even having done it 15 minutes pretty much every day for a year, then I haven't made huge progress. And I think if I wanted to become super flexible, I'd have to either start doing like an hour a day, or I would just have to accept that it's going to take 5 years, 10 years, something like that. It's important as well not to compare yourself to others. So a bunch of factors affect flexibility. I think there are people that probably would make progress way faster than me. I just happen to be suited to endurance, and building up endurance is quite easy for me. I can do it quite rapidly. Flexibility, not so much. And when we consider all of the factors that factor in there, well, there's genetics. Some people are just more trainable, some people are less trainable. There's also a bunch of lifestyle factors, like, do you spend all day working sat at a desk on a computer? If so, it's probably not going to do your flexibility any good. Or even things like, what way do you sleep at night? Well, if you sleep on your front, on your face, it's probably not as good for your flexibility, and I do that, so probably ends up with quite tight shoulders as a result of that. So there's a bunch of genetic and lifestyle factors that depend on how much results you can get out of stretching. Does that mean that you shouldn't bother with stretching? Well, I don't think so, because I think if you're naturally very stiff, it's probably equally important to do their stretching. But the idea that you're suddenly going to become this hyper flexible person if you invest the time in it, if you traditionally haven't been very flexible, well, it's probably not true, I'm afraid. Even if you spend 15 minutes for a year, you're probably not going to be super flexible. It also seems fairly clear that there isn't really some kind of secret that hasn't been uncovered. So the reason you're not taught this magical way to stretch at school is because it doesn't exist. Well, a lot of programs like to claim you can double your flexibility in 4 weeks, or suddenly go from not being anywhere near the splits to doing the splits. None of that is true. The only way to do it is to grind it out over a longer time. If you're pretty close to the splits, maybe you can do it pretty quick, but the idea that you're going to double your flexibility in 21 days, it's not going to happen. So what was my favorite? What would I recommend? Well, a couple of things that are pretty personal to me. One, I really like GOWOD. I think that just the fact that it measures your progress and you can see that progress will give you a lot of confidence, and really, I think, gives me confidence in them that they're using something that's really going to work, because they can show me how flexible I am at the start, they can show me how flexible I am each month, and I can really track that progress. And for me, none of the other programs really did that. So maybe I was making a bit of progress, but they couldn't demonstrate that to me in the same way that GOWOD can. So big respect for that. The other thing that I personally really enjoyed was the yoga teacher training, because I got a lot of fulfillment out of that. It got me doing a lot of yoga, and ultimately the thing that's going to make us more flexible is spending a lot of time doing it. So that I thought that was quite good as well, because it was just enjoyable and I had fun. So that's how I got on. That's what I enjoyed. I have gained a bit of flexibility. I found some new fun ways to stretch, and even got a bit of personal development out of it as well. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If so, please give it a thumbs up. And if you are interested in all things about sport and endurance sport and the kind of supplementary training around those, so things like yoga, strength and conditioning, stretching, psychology, then hit the subscribe button, because that's what my channel is all about, and I would love to see you in another video.